What it is, guys, it is your boy, Samoan Fan 101. I was not expecting to make this video as of yesterday. I was not. I was not even expecting to make this video as of today. But my friend, my best friend, who I will not name, last night he sent me a text at 11 o'clock. He invited me to see a movie with him. That being, of course, Captain Marvel. And, of course, I've been very vocal to my friends, and I've made my point very clear that I will not pay my own money to see Captain Marvel in theaters because of the way Brie Larson has made so many disparaging comments against white men, the way that so many media outlets, the shill media, have said that we're all trolls and man babies and that we hate it because it's a woman in the lead role, which is completely not true. And of course you have Rotten Tomatoes and what's supposed to be the greatest review aggregate site ever has now gone full lockdown in defense of this movie, fudging up critic reviews, taking away the want to see, or the don't want to see option and only leaving in the want to see option. Completely messing with the audience reviews to the point when people, including myself, can't even post our own review of the movie. Now that I've actually seen the film, I only got home like a few minutes ago, I've seen the film, and I have I've seen it, and I'll give my thoughts. This is my Captain Marvel review, and what I think of it so far. Overall, meh. I thought it was okay at best. It's a kind of mixed bag for me. This is one of the worst MCU films, which doesn't mean that it's automatically horrible. Some people say it is. Now, granted, I've only seen it once. It might take me more showings in order to see more of the flaws. But for me personally, I think this is an average film, which the MCU doesn't do average very often. In fact, many times they've done above average. Now, of course, work is subjective, and people might think some films suck and others are very good. I think this movie is average. It's in the middle somewhere. Okay, so I'm gonna do my review a little differently. I'm not gonna go through the whole plot as the movie just came out in theaters, but what I will do is I will go through the basic premises without any spoilers. So what's the sort of basic story? Well, the year is 1995. This is a full 23 years before the events of Avengers Infinity War. And the Kree Empire, in their capital Hala, lives a character by the name of Vers, who is played by Brie Larson in this movie. She is led by a warrior named Yon-Rogg, who's played by Jude Law, and together they go on a mission. However, during this mission, they come across a group that they fight against called the Skrulls. The Skrulls capture Vers and end up going through her mind and probing memories that she had once a long time ago. Memories of her life on Earth, back when she was known by a different name. For the last 6 years in this movie, by the way, she's been having amnesia since 1989 and does not remember her life before joining the Kree. As she fights against the Skrulls, she ends up landing on planet Earth, which of course used to be her home when she went on another name. And of course she comes across S.H.I.E.L.D. agents Nick Fury and Phil Coulson, played respectively by Samuel L. Jackson and Clark Gregg, and through basically almost like a buddy cop routine with Nick Fury, go on a quest throughout the movie. They discover truths, they discover lies. Vers discovers that her true name was once Brie Larson, was once Carol Danvers, and discovers her past while she's on Earth, as well as other pertinent and important information. And of course, the part of this movie, she needs to decide what side she's on and who are her true enemies. Through all this, it's supposed to give a journey in order for Carol Danvers to discover who she truly is and her powers. That's basically the basic plot of this film. Now, let's get into some of the positives, because there are a few positives that I genuinely enjoy. Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury is by far the best part of this entire film. Samuel L. Jackson carries this film. He has personality, he's got good humor, he's got witty lines, he's got everything you want in one of your lead heroes. And on top of that, the CG for making because we've seen the CG in the trailers, the CG for Samuel L. Jackson in the movie, they pulled it off rather exquisitely in this movie. The guy looks like he did back in the 90s. And of course, if you've seen films like Pulp Fiction and some other movies that came about back in the 90s, you'll know that this is pretty close to what Samuel L. Jackson used to look like. And it's really cool to see a young Samuel L. Jackson again. It was really cool. The CG they did for his face was absolutely excellent. And yes, let's be fair, while not nearly as much work needed to be done, Clark Gregg as Phil Coulson, they also added work onto him, and the CG for him looks pretty good. So as far as the CG look for both characters, I don't mind at all. In fact, I think they're great. Now with that being said, Samuel L. Jackson does great, even with the 70-year-old body. Now a 70-year-old body, he still moves around pretty good for someone his age, which is really cool to see. Ben Mendelsohn as a character by the name of Talos. He is very good in this movie. Unlike what the S.H.I.E.L.D. media have said, he's not like A+ material. Even though, you know, he's part of the Skrull, here's the thing. Talos is a very interesting character as the movie moves along. Interesting in the sense that you don't really know too much about him. And of course, certain things are discovered about the character that I will not reveal in this movie. In this movie review, I should say. And I keep thinking Talos. In the movie, they pronounce it as Talos. So maybe I'm just like, you know, Thanos. Like Thanos, Talos. I'll just say Talos. Talos is very good. He's not among the levels of the great Marvel villains, like, say, Killmonger, Thanos, Ego, Hera, and the Grandmaster from Thor Ragnarok. Missing a character. The Vulture. I already mentioned Killmonger. Ghost. Talos does not rank among those guys in terms of his performance in the movie, but then again, his character isn't necessarily supposed to be like those other characters. Then you also have Jude Law as the character Yon-Rogg. Jude Law is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum from Talos. You could take, and this means several different things that I will not reveal. He's not like the again, that's for spoiler territory. I'm not here to discuss spoilers. But yeah, Jude Law as Yon-Rogg he's very good. Jude Law's performance is very good, and he definitely commands a certain presence when on screen, but he's not in the movie nearly as much as you think he is. He's in the movie quite a lot in the beginning when Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, is with the Kree on their mission. He's in the movie there. He's in small little scenes sprinkled throughout the film, and then he shows up again near the end of the film. So he's in the movie, and he does have moments to perform very well, but he doesn't. He's not in the movie nearly as much as you might think, or you might even want to be in there. Lashana Lynch as Maria Rambeau who of course was the human best friend of the Carol Danvers character. Now, knowing what going through into this movie, I thought that Maria Rambeau was probably not going to be that great. I thought she was going to be okay at best. I found myself actually liking Maria Rambeau quite a bit. I liked the performance from Lashana Lynch. I liked the personality that came from the character. I liked, kind of the realistic setting of how she tried to make herself feel. I liked that. I think that was the purpose of Lynch's character, saying that she wanted to be a character that especially mothers in a black community could be proud of. And yeah, Lashana Lynch did feel kind of like a mother. Not overly stern, but definitely stern enough to where she commands presence from her daughter, Monica. And as well as, the other side of the spectrum where she's also the best friend of Carol Danvers, which is the one thing about the character that doesn't work well, but I'm not going to blame Lashana Lynch. I'm blaming that entirely on the writing and on the performance of Carol Danvers. I'll get to that in a bit. Then we have, we have other things. We have, of course, with the exception of a couple instances, we have very, very good special effects. The special effects, I already mentioned the ones for Clark Gregg and Samuel L. Jackson when it came to younger versions of their characters. But the special effects for most of the other stuff is actually really good. And the moments in which the special effects shine the most have to do with all the space stuff. The ships, the technology, the things they use, whether it's the Kree or the Skrull, all the space stuff works perfectly. And speaking of the effects, I'm pretty sure these are all practical. When we see the Skrulls as their alien selves and not disguised as humans, I think that they look absolutely great. I'm pretty sure they're practical effects, and they all look great. Especially Ben Mendelsohn as Talos. Now, with that said, what are some other things? What are some other things I like? Well, the musical score, not the pop songs, but the musical score is very good. It's very good, and he's very much, MCU-like. And the MCU at this point does great with a lot of the scores in their movies. It does great for the tones they're trying to set. And look, while I'm not the biggest fan of this movie, this film does have a lot going for it. However, the things that hold this movie down are big. Big things that it really sucks that they couldn't get right. First of all, let's get into the negative. We got to get into the negative on this one, folks. The negative so far, well, let's get the biggest one out of the way. Brie Larson as Carol Danvers. I don't know whether or not it was the directors, the writers, or Brie Larson herself. It was probably a mix of all three of them. Whoever it was, they seriously need to rethink this character. Brie Larson is not interesting. She's not interesting in this movie at all. She's not interesting. I mean, the backstory can be interesting. Should I say the character and her attitude is not interesting? And near the beginning of the movie, and around the first half of the movie, well, maybe not first half, but, sorry about that. Closer to the first third of the movie, Brie Larson isn't that likable. And to be fair, it's because of her training. To be fair, it's because of the training, because Jude Law's character, Yon-Rogg, says that in order to control your powers, you need to, quiet down your emotion and let the intelligence reign free. Which of course is spat in the face near the end of this film. So yeah, there's that. Yeah. So, but I think what it is the performance. It's just not a good performance. It's actually a very bad performance. And it really shines about halfway through the movie when Brie Larson's character, Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, is supposed to be... she has a moment. I'm not going to spoil what it is. But she has a moment where she finds out a particular truth. She finds a moment in which something happens, and what's supposed to happen at least, is she's supposed to let all of her emotion out, all of her emotion, everything that has been built up to this point is just supposed to come crashing down. She's supposed to feel it all at once and just to let it out and to show signs of truly great acting. Brie Larson doesn't do that here. She remains very stoic. She remains very almost dead-faced. We hear her yelling, which is easy to simulate anger in acting, but we don't see too much emotion from her. That's the thing that kills me. And from the rest of the movie, I was almost... My friend had to, like... If my friend wasn't there, I'd be going nuts. My friggin' deal was that she wasn't emoting. Several times, I quietly yelled at the screen, show some fucking emotion! I was like begging for her to show some emotion that wasn't snarky or smirky. Not, or basically condescending and sarcastic. I'm talking real emotion, likability, something to make this character feel human. It's funny. I watched Alita Battle Angel in theater last month. And it's funny because that character is a robot, but the robot character, the performance is so great, it feels human even though she's a robot. Brie Larson as Captain Marvel in this movie feels robotic even though she's human. It's perplexingly backwards. She feels kind of like a robot. Whereas the robot in Alita Battle Angel feels interesting and feels, very much, feels interesting and feels like you can relate to the character. You can't relate to this character. And you know what's funny? You know what's absolutely funny about this? The dead-face expression of Brie Larson everyone's been saying. There are some flashback scenes to when not Brie Larson, but Carol Danvers was a little girl. And in these instances, they're played by two different actors. In fact, I got their names up here. McKenna Grace plays a 13-year-old Carol Danvers in the flashback scenes, and London Fuller plays a 6-year-old Carol Danvers in the flashback scenes. And there's a scene in both those movies, in both of those flashbacks, there's a scene near the end when we see images of Brie Larson standing up above the men, proving to herself that she can do it. She doesn't need a man's help. She's a girl rising up from her, from her childhood of toxic masculinity. I'll get to that in a second. And it just doesn't work. And on top of that, the two little girl actresses, the two younger girl actresses, both of them have these dead-face expressions just like Brie Larson. It is absolutely insane. It is insane. And I could not stand that. My best friend also was like, yeah, we didn't get much there. We really didn't. So there's that. Another thing, and this also goes with Brie Larson, but it has to do also with the writing. In the movie, they've been building up the fact that this movie, Carol Danvers does not need a love interest because the love interest portion of the movie has been replaced by the best friend act of the movie. And we've seen this before in films. Captain America Winter Soldier. Granted, he did once have a love interest, and they did, tease the idea of him trying to find a new girlfriend. I gotta give the movie this. Even though they teased it, Winter Soldier focused mostly on the best friend aspect. Two different aspects, actually. Once with the growing friend... Well, actually 3 times. Once with the growing friendship between Steve Rogers and Natasha Romanoff. Again with the new budding friendship between Steve Rogers and Sam Wilson, who plays the Falcon, who is the Falcon. And later in the movie, when it's revealed that Bucky Barnes is alive and is the Winter Soldier, between, of course, Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes, and how that dynamic works into it. It's all about friendship in that movie. And I was not against the idea of the love interest portion being replaced by the best friend portion. I don't mind that at all. What I do mind is the execution. The execution was not good. There is little to no chemistry at all between these two actresses. And it's clear that, and if you watch the movie, it's clear Lashana Lynch is trying. Lashana Lynch is trying to be that person. But and this has to do probably more with the writing, but also on Brie Larson's performance. She doesn't take it like, oh, this is her best friend. And granted, part of that is the amnesia, but when she regains her memories, even then, you don't really feel a friendship between them. The chemistry there is almost non-existent. Lashana Lynch is trying, but Brie Larson is seemingly phoning it in, and the writing and the direction of this movie is very inconsistent. Very inconsistent. Another thing that I won't say was horrible, but what did not spark my fire either, was Annette Bening as Dr. Wendy Larson, a.k.a. Mar-Vell, from The Kree. And this has to end. I'm not saying the ideas of the character was a bad thing, but I had one problem with it, and I had the exact same problem with Tilda Swinton's character as the Ancient One in Doctor Strange 3 years ago. Changing the race and maybe not race, but changing the gender of a character just to appease a certain audience. And when they easily could have made a couple different tweaks and kept the character overall the same. If you remember, if you've read the comics, and I haven't, but I know this, Mar-Vell is a beach blonde male superhero character that's kind of the precursor to, it's kind of the precursor to the Captain Marvel or Miss Marvel, whatever we know today. In this movie, they replaced the bleach blonde, superhero precursor to a middle-aged white woman who is not a superhero in this movie, but is a scientist and happens to be one of the Kree. Now, I forget whether or not Mar-Vell was a Kree in the comics, but that really doesn't matter here. That aside, because, backstories can be changed. But when you replace an entire gender with the opposite gender, then that gets on my nerves. And this isn't let's make this very clear. This is not a gender thing. This is not like a gender thing. I hate women. If this was a female character in the comics and they turned it into a male character in the film, I would be just as mad. Let's get that out of the way. I would be just as infuriated. So the actual changing of the gender is what I have a problem with, not the character itself. I don't like that they did that. Although this does bring up another little thing I didn't like, the Supreme Intelligence. Now, I actually liked the Supreme Intelligence and how they tried to play it off, but so in order to access the Supreme Intelligence, you need to basically be connected to these little like blue little not tentacles, but almost like string things. They connect to your body and they give you access to the Supreme Intelligence. And this is one of the two sequences of the movie where the effects looked so fake. The one effect that looked so fake. The other one is sort of fake, but it's fun enough. It was the effect, like the effect they go to connect you with it. It's kind of like the weird, like, tentacle porn in Dungeons and Dragons, the movie back in 2000. It's not as bad as that, but it's up there. It looked so fake when watching it. I'm like, oh man, dude, this is looking fake. And even my friends like, yeah, it is. So that's the one. So that's the other one thing. The other effect that looked pretty fake was Goose. Not Goose most of the movie, but when Goose is doing something awesome, I'll say kind of reminds me of the Rathars from Star Wars: The Force Awakens. When it's doing Rathar stuff, it kind of looks fake, but it's also enjoyable enough to the point where you kind of overlook it. I almost forgot to mention that. I did enjoy Goose in this movie. Granted, Goose isn't in the movie. Goose is not like a big part of the movie, but you know, I generally, you know, enjoyed Goose. I thought Goose was entertaining enough. Then we have, but then we come to a negative. I praised Samuel L. Jackson in this movie. I will not praise Clark Gregg as Phil Coulson. And it has nothing to do with Clark Gregg himself. The performance of Coulson is actually really, really good. But there's one problem. Phil Coulson is barely in this movie. He's in the movie. He's got single-digit level minutes in this movie. That's how little Clark Gregg is actually in this film. So yeah, the technology they used to make Clark Gregg look younger, they might as well not even done it. Because he's barely in the film. And you know who else is barely in the film? Ronan the Accuser. If you saw the trailers, they subtly hinted at Lee Pace returning as Ronan the Accuser. And it says like that when you watch it, it's like, this is not Ronan. Now, granted, it's 20 years previous to Guardians of the Galaxy, but even then, A, Ronan's barely in the movie. B, even if he was in the movie full time, the guy looks weird. You look at Ronan and how he looked in Guardians of the Galaxy, and then you look at Ronan in this movie, it's like, you almost know it's the same guy. You don't even know it's the same. You barely even know it's the same guy. His eyes are not nearly as prominent. The black streaks under his eyes, which made him look like a complete badass. He's not. It's not there. It's like, what the fuck? How could you fuck up Ronan so badly? And to bring back Lee Pace as Ronan the Accuser and barely be maybe 4 or 5 minutes in the movie maximum, I don't even think he's in the movie that much. He's barely in the movie at all. Maybe 2, 3, 4 minutes at most. It's ridiculous how they misused Ronan the Accuser, who is not probably the most interesting villain compared to the other ones I mentioned earlier, but is definitely not, like, horrible. He's a pretty fun villain when working off the Guardians. Not in this movie. And speaking of this movie, they also brought back Djimon Hounsou as Korath. And I'm like, why did you bring him back? Korath doesn't even... We don't even see any on-screen dialogue between Korath and Ronan. It's not there. Well, okay, technically it's there, but Ronan's like in a Star Wars style, like, projection thing. But in terms of, you know, face-to-face, like, working collusion, it's not there. Korath and Ronan the Accuser do not share on-screen story time in that sense. And then we come to the biggest problem with this movie, and that's the writing. The writing in this movie is very inconsistent. There are several lines that are supposed to be funny, and I didn't laugh at all. There are some things that, like a lot of the quote-unquote jokes, I didn't laugh at. Now, to be fair, through watching this movie, I did have one genuine laugh and about 2, maybe 3 chuckles. That was the extent of the humor that got to me in this movie. It's not nearly as humorous as you might think a Marvel movie would be nowadays. And this it just doesn't work that well. The comedy's not that great, but like I said, the writing is what really holds this film back. And I said the exact same thing about The Last Jedi. The writing is just not that great. Of course, we know what the purpose of the writing was. This was a feminist movie. It was supposed to promote Captain Marvel as the hero to all female-led characters, and a lot of them, and we have the flashbacks of the men telling her, don't get up, you can't do it, you know, slow down. Another guy later in the movie tells her, maybe you should smile more. I'm just like, the toxic masculine men is strong with this movie, and I fucking hate it. I absolutely hate it when they do this. When they try to make men look like all toxic, like try to make us look like shit. That's basically what they're trying to do. They make us look like crap. Oh man, that's so angering. There's a moment of editing here. There's a couple moments here and there in the movie where the editing job is not that good. They should have kept continuing with the shot, but instead they cut back to something else, and then they cut back to what we were supposed to be paying attention to in the first place. It's like, dude, WTF? Why are you doing this? Ugh, it's inconsistent in that way. So, and although it's not nearly as bad as I thought it might be, but there's definitely a couple moments in there where it is. Particularly on the train sequence, you'll notice it. So with the writing, like I mentioned the feminist stuff already. Well, here's something. There's a scene, and this is when, and we've seen the trailers, Captain Marvel flying. Throughout the early and later portions of the movie, we see Captain Marvel wearing a mask. Yeah, we see Captain Marvel wearing a mask in space, and we see him wearing it in space. So obviously, it's like a map to protect, give you air, make sure you don't die from being in space, gives you oxygen. That's the sort of thing it is. Later in the movie, she loses the blue portion, because when the mask was on, the blue portion is like open, kind of like the old Batman mask, where it's like this part is open and it's just skin. She didn't cover that up. Early in the movie, we saw it covered up with this blue laser-like substance. Which, by the way, I will mention, I did really like the space stuff, the ships, the flying, anything that had to do with the technology of the spatial equipment. That I thought was done very well. But then we have, but back to the mask thing. Then later in the movie, we don't see the blue laser thing when she starts flying in space, but she is still wearing the mask. And I'm just like, okay, that gets on my nerves a little bit, but okay, look, I'll let it slide. I'll let it slide a little bit. Then, at the very end of the movie, she leads a ship away from Earth, at the very end of the film. She's flying, her mask is not on. And she's in space. How is she breathing? How is she breathing? That makes no freaking sense. The fact that she is breathing. Oh my god. And speaking of inconsistent writing, another that's inconsistent is the timeline. This movie retconned the Tesseract. The Tesseract, I'm not even gonna, I'm not even gonna, I know it's somewhat of a spoiler, but it needs to be mentioned. They retconned the Tesseract in this movie. Of course, if you've seen Captain America: The First Avenger, you'll know that the Tesseract fell into the sea after Cap's fight with Red Skull. And that Howard Stark found the Tesseract, in the sea when looking for Steve Rogers. And supposedly the Tesseract has been in S.H.I.E.L.D.'s care ever since then. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. Here's the thing. The Tesseract, all of a sudden, is in the hands of someone else. I'm not going to explain who, but it's in the hands of another ship that happens to be in space. And it's like, really? So they just allowed the Tesseract to go free up into a spaceship, you know, orbiting above Earth with. I'm just like, my God, my Lord. And on top of, and they don't even explain how they got their hands on the Tesseract. We had to have Anna Boden reveal it to us on an interview that only furthered to anger us rather than to qualm our nerves. It's like, really? They couldn't... So the Tesseract is what gave Brie Larson her powers? This is basically a direct ripoff of Scarlet Witch. Of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver when they got their powers from the Mind Stone. Brie Larson's Captain Marvel apparently got her powers from the Space Stone. It's like, dude, really? You couldn't find another... And she even asked, like, probably sarcastically, it's like, do we have to come up with another way for Captain Marvel to get her powers? The answer is yes! Yes, you needed to come up with a different way to get her powers. You have years and years of comic books to look into. Use them. Find inspiration. And then, of course, there's a moment near the end of the movie when Nick Fury actually does lose his left eye. His left eye gets scarred, and he never really gets another eye, which is funny. But he gets scarred. I'm not going to reveal how they scar his eye, but let's just say, for a character that's as revered as Nick Fury, they turned it. It was only for a few seconds, and they turned it into a giant joke. It was ridiculous, and that actually angered me. It even angered my friend, and he wasn't angry throughout the movie like I was at certain points. But that part definitely did not sit well with him at all. There are several things I could mention, several things I really want to mention, but I think I've said my piece. I think I've made my point very clear. So what rating do I give this movie? Well, despite all of the bitching and the feminist moments like Carol Danvers shooting off the head of Arnold Schwarzenegger but not the head of Jamie Lee Curtis, and from their poster of True Lies, in the Blockbuster home video store. Aside from, you know, moments like that, it just there are those feminist moments. But to be fair, the movie is a lot more subtle at doing it than, say, Ghostbusters or The Last Jedi was at doing it in those films. So what rating will I give this film? I'm gonna give this might seem generous, but I'm gonna give this movie a 5 out of 10. Because as much as those other parts piss me off to no end, I can't ignore the things that were good in this movie. Lashana Lynch, Samuel Jackson, Clark Gregg for the brief appearance he's in it, Jude Law, Ben Mendelsohn, they're all very good in this movie. Samuel L. Jackson is absolutely great in this movie. He's fantastic. He carries this movie on his shoulder. Despite having no tension at the end of the movie, because once Captain Marvel gets her full powers at the end of the movie, there's no tension with her whatsoever, because there's no challenge that she has to rise to meet, even with her full powers. No, she just kills them all. Which is not even a spoiler, because we saw the trailer of her destroying ships left and right. That's basically what we get near the end of the movie. Yeah, that's basically what we get at the end. So, even though there's no real tension anymore once she gets her full powers, even then, I can't give it a lower... Now, maybe I'll give it a lower rating another time, but for now, I can't ignore the things that were good. I cannot, because by doing that, it would make me feel like a hypocrite. Probably the first 15 to 20 minutes of the movie were probably the best parts of the film, because that's when it felt the most consistent and I liked kind of the style in which they did it in. The space stuff looked cool. You know, a lot of the other actors, aside from the ones that I mentioned, like, you know, the characters for Carol Danvers, for Ronan, for the Supreme Intelligence and Mar-Vell to a small extent. I liked a lot of the actors in this movie, but the inconsistent writing and the lack of any real emotion for the characters, as well as all the other little things like the retconning of events, and the tension killer near the end, as well as the other things I already mentioned, it drives me up a wall. And I can't give it a rating any higher than 5. Honestly, and I know I'm going to get I might get flack for this, I think this is probably the worst MCU movie. Which, even though as much as this angered me, it wasn't bad. It wasn't a complete, in my opinion, I know other people are going to say, but in my personal opinion, it was not a complete piece of shit. There were things that were really enjoyable. There were things that were really good. It's just that those other things were so bad that it kind of just took the movie down a couple notches. So, with all that being said, I'm going to give this movie a 5 out of 10. It did nothing for me in terms of the build-up to Avengers Endgame, and I didn't really learn a whole heck of a lot about the Carol Danvers character other than her backstory. Her likes, her dislikes. I don't really know much about the character. Isn't that what this movie's supposed to be? Building up to Endgame as well as getting to know this character and why she cares? But of course we don't see any emotion, so it doesn't matter to us. And apparently it doesn't, I guess. So, Anna Boden, Ryan Fleck, shame on you for not being able to handle Brie Larson's character right. Shame on Brie Larson for not seemingly trying her best in terms of acting in this movie. Hopefully the Russo brothers pull a great performance out of you, or even a passable performance out of you. So, this movie's a 5 out of 10. And I know I said I was going to review Solo today, but this movie took it out of me. So, until tomorrow, guys, I'll see you later tomorrow when I review Solo, A Star Wars Story, and finish off Star Wars Mania. Until then,